June 19, 1944. Task Force 58, Philippine Sea. The Fighter Direction Center. Radar operators tracked blips across phosphorescent screens as Japanese attack formations transformed into intercept vectors. Message from submarine USS Albacore. Enemy carrier force detected. Multiple air groups launching. Attack imminent. Lieutenant Charles Sims adjusted his headphones and reached for the radio transmitter. 15 aircraft carriers would scramble their fighters. The USS Lexington, the USS Enterprise, and the USS Yorktown. What none of them knew was that this single day would witness the most lopsided aerial massacre in naval history. The Pacific War had taught American aviators that Japanese carrier pilots were not just skilled adversaries. They were the samurai of the skies. Destroy those pilots, and entire carrier groups would become floating targets. Admiral Jizaburo Ozawa's mobile fleet had assembled the largest carrier striking force Japan could muster. 9 aircraft carriers: Taiho, Shokaku, Zuikaku, Junyo, Hiyo, Ryuho, Chitose, Chiyoda, and Zuiho. 430 aircraft positioned to deliver a knockout blow against the American invasion of Saipan. The Imperial Japanese Navy's strategy assumed that land-based aircraft from Guam, Rota, and Tinian would supplement the carrier strikes. Combined with the mobile fleet's aircraft, over 500 planes would overwhelm American defenses. Admiral Soemu Toyoda, Commander-in-Chief of the combined fleet, had declared, "The fate of the Empire rests on this one battle." The Grumman F6F Hellcat sliced through Pacific thermals at 380 miles per hour. Her Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine generated 2,000 horsepower, propelling 12,598 pounds of armor and firepower through contested airspace. Commander David McCampbell stood in the ready room aboard USS Essex studying the tactical situation. His air group carried 104 pilots trained specifically to kill Japanese aircraft. 6 Browning .50 caliber machine guns per fighter, 400 rounds per gun, and mounted throughout the fuselage 212 pounds of cockpit armor that would prove decisive in the coming battle. The Hellcat represented American industrial engineering at its peak. Unlike the fragile Zero that sacrificed everything for maneuverability, the F6F prioritized survivability and firepower. Each of the 6 machine guns fired armor-piercing incendiary rounds at 850 rounds per minute. The ballistics were unforgiving. The Zero could outmaneuver the Hellcat in a turning fight. The Hellcat needed only 2 seconds of accurate fire to destroy any Japanese aircraft. Lieutenant Alexander Vraciu had studied those statistics during 8 months of combat. DePaul University graduate with a mind for deflection shooting and energy management, Vraciu understood that aerial combat was ultimately about altitude and speed. Kinetic energy determined survival. Target acquisition, deflection angles. The difference between victory and death often came down to split-second positioning and superior firepower. The American force assembled for this battle was staggering. 15 fleet carriers, 956 aircraft, including 475 Hellcat fighters. Task Force 58, under Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher, had become the most powerful naval striking force ever assembled. Against this armada, Ozawa could muster 430 carrier aircraft plus approximately 100 land-based planes, already outnumbered nearly 2 to 1 before the first shot was fired. Aboard the Japanese carrier Taiho, Vice Admiral Ozawa reviewed his battle plan. 430 aircraft organized into sequential attack waves. The first mobile fleet displaced 65,000 tons of carrier steel, powered by the finest engines Japanese shipyards could produce. Her air groups contained pilots who had trained for months in preparation for this decisive engagement. But the Japanese Navy's greatest weakness remained the same vulnerability that had plagued it since Midway: the inexperience of replacement pilots. Veterans of Pearl Harbor, the Indian Ocean raids, and the early carrier battles had been steadily attritioned. Their replacements averaged fewer than 200 flying hours compared to American pilots with over 500 hours of intensive training. The disparity went deeper than flight hours. American pilots received extensive gunnery training, carrier landing practice, and instrument flying instruction. Japanese replacement pilots often had never fired their guns before entering combat. Many had performed fewer than 10 carrier landings. Navigation training was minimal, relying on flight leaders to guide formations to targets. The American ships formed a defensive ring, a layered defense with destroyers on the perimeter, battleships in the middle ring, and carriers at the center. Each ship swept the sky with SK and SC radar systems. Fighter direction officers worked in air-conditioned compartments, their plotting boards tracking every contact within 150 miles. Radar operator First Class James Peterson had been tracking contacts for 14 months across the Pacific. His hands moved automatically across the radar controls as he adjusted the gain and sweep rate. The screen showed clear returns against minimal sea clutter. Weather conditions were ideal for radar detection. Clear skies, unlimited visibility, with no precipitation to create false returns. At 10 o'clock on June 19th, Peterson's scope erupted with contacts. Range 150 miles, bearing 260 degrees, altitude approximately 20,000 feet. He pressed the general quarters alarm and reached for the intercom. "Bridge! Radar! Large raid bearing 260, range 150 miles, Angels 20. On Ozawa's flagship, the attack coordinator had launched the first wave at 0830. 69 aircraft, 16 Zero fighters, 45 dive bombers, and 8 torpedo bombers. Launch time from deck to formation was 23 minutes. Time to target was estimated at 90 minutes, cruising at 180 knots to conserve fuel for the return flight. Fighter Director Lieutenant Joseph Eggert plotted the intercept geometry on his status board. Enemy speed estimated at 180 knots, course roughly 080 toward Task Force 58. Time to intercept approximately 35 minutes if Hellcats launched immediately. The precision of aerial interception depended on accurate vector calculations and fuel management. Admiral Mark Mitcher's response was immediate. "Launch all fighters. Vector 260, climb to Angels 25 inches. The first Hellcat launched at 10:23. Within 12 minutes, 140 F6F fighters were airborne and climbing toward the incoming raid. Each pilot had been briefed on Japanese tactics, aircraft recognition, and the critical importance of maintaining altitude advantage. The Hellcats climbed at 3,000 feet per minute, their powerful engines giving them a crucial edge in the race for altitude. Lieutenant Commander Charles Brewer led the 1st Division of Hellcats from USS Essex, 16 fighters in 4 plane divisions, climbing through 20,000 feet when radar operators called the bogies at 24,000 feet, 30 miles out and closing. "Tally-ho! Bandits! 2 o'clock high!" The sky erupted with twisting contrails as Hellcats dove on the Japanese formation. Brewer's first burst sent a Zero spiraling down in flames. His wingman destroyed a dive bomber with a deflection shot that removed its right wing. Within 90 seconds, 8 Japanese aircraft were falling toward the ocean. The Hellcats' 6.50 caliber guns created a lethal convergence at 300 yards where all 6 streams of bullets intersected. At that range, a 2-second burst delivered 170 rounds into a target area roughly 6 feet in diameter. Japanese aircraft, designed without self-sealing fuel tanks or armor protection, literally disintegrated under such concentrated firepower. Lieutenant Stanley Swede Vaitasa from USS Yorktown described the engagement. They came in perfect formation, like they were on parade. We hit them from above and behind. It was like shooting clay pigeons. They didn't even try to evade. By 11 o'clock, the first wave had been annihilated. 42 aircraft destroyed, 27 damaged and forced to return. Only 12 Japanese aircraft penetrated to attack positions, and of those, 7 were destroyed by anti-aircraft fire from the battleship screen. The new proximity-fused shells, a closely guarded secret, detonated near aircraft without requiring direct hits, creating lethal clouds of shrapnel. At 11:07, radar detected the second wave. 128 aircraft launched from Junyo, Hyo, and Ryuho at 900 hours. This formation included 53 Judy dive bombers, 27 Zero fighters, and 48 torpedo bombers. Lieutenant Commander Kazuo Takahashi, leading the strike, had survived 18 combat missions, including attacks at Coral Sea and Eastern Solomons. Fighter direction vectored fresh cap fighters to intercept 60 miles from the task force. The Hellcats had altitude advantage, 28,000 feet versus the Japanese at 19,000 feet. Energy advantage in aerial combat translated directly to tactical superiority. Lieutenant Alexander Vraciu's division was among those scrambled to meet the second wave, but his Hellcat suffered mechanical failure on launch. The supercharger stuck in low blower, limiting his speed to 300 miles per hour and climb rate to half normal. By the time he reached altitude, his squadron mates had pulled ahead to engage the enemy. Vraciu spotted the Japanese formation below him. There were at least 50 of them, Judy dive bombers in perfect formation. They looked like sitting ducks. Despite his mechanical disadvantage, Vraciu executed a diving attack from directly above the Japanese formation. His first target exploded immediately, the Judy's bomb load detonating in a massive fireball. He pulled up, rolled inverted, and dove again. The second bomber's tail separated from the fuselage as 50 caliber rounds sawed through the aluminum structure. The third kill came as Vraciu pulled out of his dive and climbed back for altitude. A Judy crossed in front of him, and he fired a short burst that set the bomber's fuel tanks ablaze. The fourth victim never saw him coming. Vraciu attacked from the bomber's blind spot below and behind, his tracers walking up the fuselage until the aircraft exploded. For his fifth kill, Vraciu chased a Judy attempting to escape at low altitude. Despite his reduced speed, he closed to point-blank range and fired. The bomber cartwheeled into the ocean. The sixth and final kill proved the most spectacular. As Vraciu lined up his shot, the Judy's bomb load detonated from the heat of burning fuel, creating a fireball that Vraciu flew through. In 8 minutes, Vraciu destroyed 6 dive bombers using only 360 rounds of ammunition. His ordnance crew later calculated he had fired less than 5 seconds total to achieve 6 kills. When he landed aboard Lexington, he held up 6 fingers to the bridge where Admiral Mitcher watched. The photograph became one of the war's iconic images. The second wave lost 97 aircraft. Hellcat pilots claimed 70 kills. Ships' anti-aircraft guns destroyed another 20. Only 31 Japanese aircraft survived to return to their carriers, most heavily damaged. The technological gap between American and Japanese aviation had become insurmountable by June 1944. The F6F Hellcat's development represented 3 years of combat experience distilled into mechanical superiority. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine produced 2,000 horsepower in standard configuration, 2,200 with water injection. This power drove a 3-bladed Hamilton standard propeller with constant speed control, allowing optimal performance at any altitude. Maximum speed at 23,000 feet was 380 miles per hour. Rate of climb exceeded 3,000 feet per minute. Service ceiling reached 37,300 feet. Defensive systems included 212 pounds of armor plating protecting the pilot, oil cooler, and oil tank. The windscreen consisted of 1.5-inch bulletproof glass capable of stopping 20mm cannon rounds. Self-sealing fuel tanks prevented the catastrophic fires that plagued Japanese aircraft. Total fuel capacity was 250 gallons internal, with provision for a 150-gallon drop tank extending range to 1,530 miles. The fire control system represented American mass production at its finest. 6 Browning M 2.50 caliber machine guns, each firing at 850 rounds per minute with 400 rounds per gun. Total ammunition load was 2,400 rounds. The guns were harmonized to converge at 300 yards, creating a concentrated impact zone where a brief burst could destroy any aircraft. Comparative analysis revealed the stark disparity. The Mitsubishi A6M50 weighed 6,025 pounds loaded, half the Hellcat's weight. Maximum speed was 351 miles per hour, 30 miles per hour slower than the F6F. Most critically, the Zero carried no armor protection and no self-sealing fuel tanks. Its two 20mm cannon carried only 60 rounds each, and the two 7.7mm machine guns were ineffective against American armor. The Yokosuka D-4Y Judy dive bomber, one of Japan's newest aircraft, could reach 339 miles per hour but remained vulnerable to any hit. Without armor or self-sealing tanks, a single incendiary bullet could ignite its fuel. The Nakajima B-6N Jill torpedo bomber suffered similar vulnerabilities while being slower and less maneuverable. Japanese pilot training had collapsed under the weight of attrition. Pre-war pilots received 700 hours of flight training before joining operational units. By 1944, replacement pilots averaged 200 hours, with some receiving as few as 100 hours before combat deployment. Navigation training was minimal. Instrument flying almost non-existent. Formation flying rudimentary. American pilot training had become an industrial process. Naval aviators received 600 hours minimum before carrier qualification. Instrument flying, navigation, gunnery, carrier operations, formation tactics, every aspect refined through systematic instruction. Training bases in Florida, Texas, and California produced 10,000 naval aviators annually by 1944. Ozawa launched his third strike at 10 o'clock. 47 aircraft from Zuikaku, Chiyoda, and Chitos. By now, Japanese flight leaders knew the previous waves had encountered fierce opposition, but orders were orders. Lieutenant Yoshio Fukumura, leading 15 Zero fighters, had watched the survivors of earlier strikes return with tales of swarming Hellcats and walls of anti-aircraft fire. Radar detected the third wave at 1,300 hours, range 120 miles. Fighter direction had refined their interception tactics based on the morning's engagements. Instead of meeting the raid head-on, CAP fighters would attack from multiple directions simultaneously, preventing mutual support among Japanese formations. Commander William Dean from USS Hornet led 20 Hellcats in a high-side attack from the sun. The Japanese fighters, flying protective weave above their bombers, never saw the Americans until tracers started connecting. Dean's first pass destroyed 3 Zeros in 15 seconds. His wingman killed 2 more in the same diving attack. The escort fighters eliminated, Hellcats fell on the bombers with ruthless efficiency. Lieutenant James Shirley from USS Bunker Hill described it. They just sat there in formation while we shot them to pieces. No evasive action, no defensive tactics. They flew straight and level while we made pass after pass. Ensign Wilbur Spider Webb, flying his first combat mission from USS Hornet, encountered the scattered remnants of the third wave. In his after-action report, he wrote, "I couldn't believe they just flew straight and level while I shot them down. After the third one exploded, I started feeling sorry for them. Then I remembered Pearl Harbor and kept shooting." Webb destroyed 6 aircraft in this single engagement, becoming an ace in a day on his first combat mission. 40 aircraft in the third wave. 7 survived to return to their carriers. Not a single Japanese aircraft reached attack position against American ships. The fourth and final wave launched at 11:30. 82 aircraft from the Japanese carrier division, including 30 Zero fighters, 36 dive bombers, and 16 torpedo bombers. This strike included many of the remaining experienced pilots, held in reserve for the decisive blow. But the strike became disorganized almost immediately. Navigation errors sent half the formation toward Guam instead of Task Force 58. Those that found the American fleet encountered a wall of fighters stacked from 10,000 to 30,000 feet. The Americans had perfected their defense, with fresh fighters constantly rotating through the combat zone. Lieutenant Commander Roger Mealy from Fighting Squadron 2 intercepted the fourth wave 40 miles from the carriers. His division of 4 Hellcats attacked 30 Japanese aircraft. In 12 minutes of combat, they destroyed 17 enemy planes without loss. Mela personally accounted for 5, methodically picking off aircraft from the rear of the formation forward. The slaughter continued as successive waves of Hellcats rotated through the battle area. Fresh fighters with full ammunition replaced those running low. Damaged Hellcats returned to their carriers while mechanics and ordnance crews prepared aircraft for immediate turnaround. The American carriers had become a continuous conveyor belt of destruction, launching fighters, recovering them, rearming, refueling, and launching again. Commander David McCampbell, leading Essex's fighters, demonstrated tactical brilliance throughout the engagement. During the morning battles, he shot down 5 Judy dive bombers in his first sortie. After refueling and rearming, he launched again in the afternoon and destroyed 2 more Zeros over Guam, bringing his day's total to 7 victories. His leadership in positioning squadrons for maximum efficiency while managing fuel and ammunition reserves proved crucial to the defense's success. By 1430, the fourth wave had ceased to exist as a cohesive force. Scattered survivors fled individually toward their carriers or diverted to Guam. American Combat Air Patrol followed them, destroying stragglers across a 100-mile swath of ocean. While Hellcats dominated the air battle, American submarines delivered crushing underwater attacks against Ozawa's carriers. USS Albacore, commanded by Lieutenant Commander James Blanchard, had been trailing the Japanese fleet since dawn. At 9:05, Blanchard fired 6 torpedoes at the carrier Taiho, Ozawa's flagship. One torpedo struck the carrier's aviation fuel tanks. The damage seemed manageable initially, but volatile fuel vapors spread throughout the ship. At 14:32, a massive explosion tore Taiho apart. The newest and largest carrier in the Japanese fleet, commissioned just 3 months earlier, sank with 1,650 crew members. USS Kavala, on her maiden war patrol under Lieutenant Commander Herman Kostler, detected carrier Shokaku at 1100 hours. Kostler fired 6 torpedoes, scoring 3 hits. Aviation fuel erupted through the hangar deck. Bomb magazines detonated in sympathetic explosions. Shokaku, veteran of Pearl Harbor, Coral Sea, and Santa Cruz, sank at 1400 hours with 1,272 men. In 4 hours, submarines had eliminated 2 fleet carriers totaling 60,000 tons. Combined with the aerial massacre, the Japanese Navy had suffered catastrophic and irreversible losses. By sunset on June 19th, the arithmetic of destruction was staggering. Japanese losses: 346 carrier aircraft destroyed, approximately 50 land-based aircraft from Guam and Rota eliminated. 2 fleet carriers sunk. More critically, over 400 pilots and aircrew killed, including most of the remaining experienced aviators. American losses: 29 aircraft in aerial combat and operational accidents. Most pilots were recovered. Total American casualties: 109 dead from all causes, including anti-aircraft accidents and operational losses. The kill ratio exceeded 15-1 in favor of American fighters. Individual pilots achieved remarkable scores. Lieutenant Alex Vraciu, 6 kills. Commander David McCampbell, 7 kills. Lieutenant William Dean, 5 kills. Ensign Wilbur Webb, 6 kills in his first combat mission. The human dimension behind these statistics was profound. Young American pilots, many in their early 20s, had systematically destroyed an entire generation of Japanese naval aviators. Lieutenant Junior Grade Charles Stimson from USS Cabot later reflected, "It wasn't really combat, it was execution. They came at us in waves, and we shot them down in waves. I felt like I was at a target range." Japanese pilot Saburo Sakai, observing from Iwo Jima, later wrote, "June 19th, 1944, was the death of Japanese naval aviation. Our carefully rebuilt air groups, 2 years in training, were destroyed in a single day." The Americans had turned the sky into a slaughterhouse. Those who survived spoke of Hellcats everywhere, above, below, behind. There was no escape. June 20th brought the final act. American search planes located Ozawa's retreating fleet 275 miles west of Task Force 58. Admiral Mitcher faced a critical decision: launch a strike at extreme range, knowing his pilots would return after dark, or let the Japanese escape. At 16:30, Mitcher gave the order: launch everything. 216 American aircraft launched in the fading light, 85 Hellcats, 77 dive bombers, and 54 torpedo bombers. They found the Japanese fleet at sunset, attacking through desperate anti-aircraft fire. The strike sank carrier Hio and 2 fleet oilers, while damaging carriers Zuikaku and Chiyoda, battleship Haruna, and cruiser Maya. Japanese combat air patrol, reduced to fewer than 35 operational fighters, could offer minimal resistance. Another 65 Japanese aircraft were destroyed in this twilight battle. The return flight became an epic of navigation and survival. Pilots flew through darkness with fuel gauges touching empty. Many had never attempted night carrier landings. radio discipline broke down as desperate pilots called for bearings to any American ship. Admiral Mitcher made perhaps his most famous decision. Turn on the lights. Every ship in Task Force 58 illuminated, searchlights pointed vertically, running lights blazing, flight decks outlined in lights. The risk of submarine attack was accepted to save American air crews. Destroyers fired star shells to mark the fleet's position. Cruisers turned on searchlights as beacons. The ocean lit up like a city, guiding exhausted pilots home. Aircraft landed on any available deck. Fuel-starved planes ditched alongside destroyers. Damaged aircraft crash-landed on carriers, their crews pushing them overboard to clear decks for others still airborne. 80 aircraft were lost to fuel exhaustion or deck crashes, but aggressive rescue operations saved most crews. Destroyers assigned as plane guards recovered pilots sometimes within minutes of ditching. Only 49 airmen from the returning strike force were lost, a remarkable achievement given the circumstances. The Battle of the Philippine Sea, christened the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot by victorious American pilots, marked the end of Japanese carrier aviation as an effective force. In 2 days, Japan lost approximately 480 carrier and land-based aircraft, 3 fleet carriers, and 2 oilers. The pilot losses were catastrophic. Over 445 aircrew killed, including most remaining veterans. Admiral Ozawa's Operation A-Go had assumed rough parity in pilot skill and aircraft performance. Instead, Japanese pilots encountered American aviators with superior training flying superior aircraft supported by superior radar and fighter direction. The technological and training gap had become unbridgeable. The Marianas fell to American forces within weeks. B-29 superfortresses based on Saipan, Tinian, and Guam would soon bring the Japanese homeland under sustained strategic bombardment. The November 1944 raids from these bases marked the beginning of the systematic destruction of Japanese cities and industry. Japanese naval aviation attempted one final operation at Leyte Gulf 4 months later, but could muster only 108 aircraft from 6 carriers. Most were shot down without achieving significant results. The carriers themselves were sacrificed as decoys, empty shells of their former power. After Leyte Gulf, Japanese carriers never again launched offensive operations. The Hellcats' dominance reflected American industrial capability and design philosophy. Grumman produced 12,275 F6F Hellcats in just over 2 years, with peak production reaching 600 aircraft per month. Each aircraft required 20,000 man-hours to construct, yet assembly lines achieved remarkable efficiency through standardization and minimal design changes. The basic F6F design remained essentially unchanged from 1943 to 1945, while Germany and Japan continuously modified their fighters seeking marginal performance improvements. America focused on mass production of a proven design. This philosophy extended throughout American aircraft production. Quantity with adequate quality defeated quality without quantity. Radar technology provided the decisive edge in fighter direction. The SK air search radar could detect aircraft at 100 miles, allowing 40 minutes warning of incoming raids. The SM fighter direction radar provided precise bearing and altitude data for vectoring interceptors. Combat information centers integrated radar data with radio communications, creating a real-time battle management system decades ahead of its time. The proximity fuse, one of the war's most closely guarded secrets, revolutionized anti-aircraft defense. These shells detonated automatically when passing near aircraft, eliminating the need for precise altitude settings. The resulting lethality forced Japanese aircraft to attack from higher altitudes, reducing their accuracy. American logistics sustained continuous operations at unprecedented tempo. Task Force 58's Service Squadron delivered 270,000 gallons of aviation fuel, 7,000 gallons of lubricating oil, and 45 tons of ammunition daily during the battle. Replacement aircraft were catapulted from escort carriers directly to fleet carriers during operations. Damaged aircraft were repaired overnight by maintenance crews working around the clock. While technology and training created the conditions for victory, individual pilots executed the destruction. Their stories reveal the human dimension behind the statistics. Lieutenant Junior Grade Milton Carruthers from USS Bunker Hill achieved 5 kills despite having his hydraulic system shot out by a Japanese rear gunner. Unable to lower his landing gear normally, he cranked them down manually while flying with his knees, then landed successfully on the carrier. His plane captain counted 47 holes in the Hellcat's fuselage and wings. Ensign Robert Duncan from USS Princeton was separated from his division during the second wave interception. Flying alone, he encountered 12 Japanese bombers without escort. In a running battle lasting 15 minutes, Duncan destroyed 4 bombers before running out of ammunition. He then used his aircraft to force another bomber to crash into the ocean, achieving 5 kills without firing his last shots. Lieutenant Commander George Duncan, no relation to Robert, from USS Monterey, led a division that intercepted 40 Japanese aircraft. Outnumbered 10-1, Duncan's 4 Hellcats destroyed 19 enemy planes in 8 minutes. Duncan personally accounted for 6, using disciplined fire control to maximize his ammunition. His wingman, Lieutenant Junior Grade John Strain, destroyed 5 more. The coordination between pilots demonstrated American tactical superiority. Divisions maintained mutual support while engaging multiple targets. Wingmen protected leaders during attacks. Damaged aircraft were escorted home by teammates. This disciplined teamwork contrasted sharply with the increasingly desperate individual efforts of Japanese pilots. For Japanese aviators, June 19th was apocalyptic. Pilot Officer Yoshijiro Shirahama, one of 15 survivors from carrier Zuikaku's air group, later testified, "We knew we were flying to our deaths when we saw the wall of Hellcats waiting for us. The sky was filled with tracers. Planes exploded everywhere. I saw at least 20 of our aircraft destroyed in less than a minute." Lieutenant Commander Akira Tarui, leading torpedo bombers from Chiyoda, watched his entire squadron annihilated. The Americans attacked from above, below, and both sides simultaneously. We had no chance to maneuver or counterattack. My gunner was killed in the first pass. My controls were shot away in the second. I crashed into the sea and spent 6 hours in the water before a destroyer found me. The few experienced pilots understood their situation was hopeless. Lieutenant Sadamu Komachi, an ace with 12 victories, survived by immediately jettisoning his bombs and fleeing at wave-top height. He later wrote, "The young pilots followed their training and maintained formation while being slaughtered. Those of us who survived did so by abandoning all tactical doctrine and running for our lives." The psychological impact was devastating. Ensign Takeo Miyazawa, who returned to Carrier Junyo with his aircraft riddled with bullets, reported, "The Americans were everywhere. As soon as we engaged one group of Hellcats, another group attacked from a different direction. Our formations dissolved into chaos. Pilots were screaming on the radio. I saw at least 30 of our planes going down in flames simultaneously. Admiral Mark Mitcher's leadership proved decisive throughout the battle. His decision to launch everything available against the incoming raids rather than maintaining reserves maximized defensive firepower when it mattered most. His controversial choice to illuminate the fleet for returning pilots demonstrated moral courage, risking submarine attack to save his air crews. Mitcher's fighter direction officers coordinated the most complex aerial defense in naval history. Managing over 450 fighters simultaneously required precise coordination between radar operators, fighter directors, and squadron commanders. The system worked flawlessly, vectoring fighters to optimal intercept positions while managing fuel states and ammunition loads. Admiral Raymond Spruance, commanding 5th Fleet, faced criticism for not pursuing Ozawa's fleet more aggressively. However, his primary mission was protecting the Saipan invasion force. His cautious approach prevented any possibility of a Japanese end run against the vulnerable transports and supply ships. The 50,000 troops ashore on Saipan depended on continuous supply from the invasion fleet. Admiral Ozawa, despite the catastrophic losses, conducted a skilled withdrawal under terrible conditions. His decision to transfer his flag from the sinking Taiho to cruiser Haguro, then to carrier Zuikaku, maintained command continuity. His after-action report honestly assessed the disaster. The enemy's fighter direction and pilot quality exceeded all estimates. Our aircrew training was inadequate for this level of combat. Behind the fighter pilots, thousands of sailors sustained the aerial defense. Plane handlers moved aircraft on crowded flight decks with choreographed precision. Ordnance men loaded millions of rounds of ammunition. Mechanics repaired battle damage between sorties. Landing signal officers guided damaged aircraft aboard despite hydraulic failures, wounded pilots, and fuel exhaustion. Aviation machinist mate first class Roberto Martinez from USS Lexington recalled, "We turned around aircraft in 12 minutes. Refuel, rearm, check the engine, patch bullet holes with fabric and dope, and launch again." We worked 20 hours straight during the battle. Nobody complained. We knew our pilots were counting on us. The ammunition expenditure was staggering. Task Force 58 fired over 2.4 million rounds of .50 caliber ammunition on June 19th alone. Ordnance crews loaded 15,000 rounds per hour at peak tempo. Belt after belt of ammunition moved from magazines to aircraft, a continuous flow that never stopped during daylight hours. The medical response saved numerous lives. Flight surgeons treated wounded pilots between missions, allowing many to return to combat. Pharmacist mate second class James Thompson from USS Enterprise performed emergency surgery on a pilot whose foot was nearly severed by cannon fire. The pilot flew again 3 weeks later with a prosthetic attachment on his rudder pedal. Rescue operations achieved remarkable success. Destroyers assigned as plane guards recovered pilots sometimes within minutes of ditching. Submarines on lifeguard stations saved aviators hundreds of miles from the task force. OS-2. U-Kingfisher floatplanes launched from battleships and cruisers rescued pilots from inside Japanese-controlled waters. American codebreakers had provided strategic warning of Japanese intentions weeks before the battle. The decoded Japanese naval messages revealed Ozawa's basic plan, order of battle, and approximate timing. This intelligence allowed Spruance to position his forces optimally and prepare for the expected attack patterns. The capture of the Z-Plan documents from Admiral Koga's crashed aircraft in March 1944 had given American planners detailed insight into Japanese strategic thinking. Every aspect of Operation Eigo was anticipated and countered before the first aircraft launched. Radio intelligence units aboard carriers intercepted and translated Japanese tactical communications in real time. Lieutenant Charles Sims, a Japanese language specialist aboard USS Lexington, monitored enemy pilot conversations throughout the battle. His translations provided immediate tactical intelligence on Japanese formations, targets, and damage assessments. One intercepted transmission revealed the depth of Japanese despair. A squadron leader called out, "This is impossible! They know where we are before we see them. It's not fighting, it's murder." Sims translated this in real time, boosting American morale while confirming the effectiveness of fighter direction. The intelligence advantage extended to technical knowledge. Captured Zero fighters had been thoroughly analyzed, revealing every strength and weakness. American pilots knew exact turning radii, climb rates, and vulnerable points. Training programs incorporated this knowledge, teaching pilots precisely how to fight Japanese aircraft. The Marianas Turkey Shoot fundamentally altered the Pacific War's trajectory. Japanese carriers would never again launch significant offensive operations. The Imperial Navy's carefully rebuilt air groups, 2 years in training, had been eliminated in 8 hours of combat. Production statistics illustrated Japan's impossible position. American factories produced 36,000 combat aircraft in 1944. Japan manufactured 13,000, most of inferior quality using substitute materials due to resource shortages. American pilot training programs graduated 65,000 aviators in 1944. Japan trained fewer than 5,000, most with minimal flight hours. The technological gap continued widening. America introduced improved fighters like the F-4U-4 Corsair and F-8F Bearcat. Radar systems improved monthly. Proximity-fused anti-aircraft shells made attacking American ships virtually suicidal. Japan had no response except the desperate kamikaze tactics adopted 3 months later at Leyte Gulf. Strategic bombing from the captured Marianas began in November 1944. B-29s flying from Saipan and Tinian systematically destroyed Japanese cities and industry. The March 1945 firebombing of Tokyo killed more people than either atomic bomb. The atomic bombs that ended the war flew from Tinian's North Field, built on an island captured because Japanese naval aviation could not stop the American invasion. The institutional knowledge lost with Japan's veteran pilots could never be replaced. Flight instructors were pulled from training units to fill combat squadrons, further degrading training quality. By war's end, Japanese pilots averaged less than 40 hours flight time before entering combat. Many never successfully landed on a carrier. The battle validated American training doctrine, emphasizing deflection shooting, energy management, and mutual support. The thatch weave and similar tactical innovations proved superior to Japanese emphasis on individual combat and aerobatic skill. Team tactics defeated individual prowess consistently. Aircraft design philosophy was vindicated completely. The Hellcats' emphasis on pilot protection, firepower, and structural strength proved correct. The Zero's design philosophy, sacrificing everything for maneuverability, had become obsolete. Modern air combat rewarded survivability and firepower over agility. Fighter direction emerged as the crucial multiplier. Centralized control maximized defensive efficiency while minimizing losses. Radar-guided interception allowed defenders to always achieve favorable positioning. The Japanese, lacking comparable systems, flew blind into prepared killing zones. Logistics determined sustainability. American ability to maintain continuous operations, rapidly repair damage, and replace losses created cumulative advantages. Japanese inability to replace losses meant each battle further degraded their capabilities. Attrition warfare favored the side with superior industrial capacity. Training quality proved more important than individual courage. American pilots with 600 hours of training consistently defeated Japanese pilots with 200 hours, regardless of determination or fighting spirit. Systematic instruction in gunnery, tactics, and instrument flying created competence that enthusiasm could not match. Veterans of the Turkey Shoot carried their experiences throughout their lives. Alex Vraciu became a test pilot, evaluating jets that would define the next generation of naval aviation. He flew the Grumman F-8F Bearcat, the Hellcat's successor, and later tested early jet fighters. Vraciu retired as a commander in 1963, having survived being shot down over the Philippines and spending 6 weeks with Filipino guerrillas. David McCampbell continued his career, eventually commanding carrier air groups and serving as captain of carriers USS Bonhomme Richard and USS Severn. He retired as a captain in 1964, the Navy's all-time leading ace with 34 victories. McCampbell received the Medal of Honor for his actions on June 19 and October 24, 1944. Many pilots became airline captains, flying the same Pacific routes they had fought to secure. The transition from military to civilian aviation was natural for men trained to fly long distances over water. Their combat experience made them exceptionally capable pilots who could handle any emergency. Japanese survivors faced different futures. Some became Buddhist monks, seeking spiritual reconciliation with their wartime experiences. Others worked in Japan's post-war aviation industry, applying hard-learned lessons to civilian aircraft design. A few wrote memoirs, preserving the perspective of the defeated. The psychological impact lasted decades. American pilots spoke of recurring dreams where Japanese aircraft kept coming in endless waves. Japanese survivors described nightmares of Hellcats attacking from every direction. Both sides carried invisible wounds that time never fully healed. Reunions brought former enemies together in later years. At a 1984 gathering, Alex Vraciu met Sadamu Komachi, one of the few Japanese survivors from June 19th. Komachi told Vraciu, "You were doing your duty, as was I. I'm glad we both survived to become friends." They corresponded until Komachi's death in 2001. The battle's legacy endures in multiple forms. Aircraft museums display restored Hellcats and Zeros, allowing visitors to appreciate the physical reality behind the statistics. The National Museum of Naval Aviation's F6F3 bears the markings of Alex Vraciu's aircraft, complete with 19 victory flags representing his total score. The USS Yorktown, now a museum ship in Charleston, South Carolina, includes exhibits on the Turkey Shoot. Visitors can stand in the Combat Information Center, where fighter directors vectored Hellcats to their intercepts. The radar scopes, plotting boards, and communication equipment remain as they were in 1944. Maritime archaeologists have located several ships sunk during the battle. Shokaku rests at 12,000 feet, her flight deck still bearing aircraft ready for launch that never occurred. Taiho lies even deeper, her massive hull broken by the explosion that sent her down. These war graves are protected sites, memorializing the thousands who died in the Philippine Sea. Historical analysis continues evolving. Newly discovered Japanese documents reveal previously unknown details about pilot training, aircraft production, and command decisions. American records, gradually declassified, show the full extent of intelligence advantages and technological superiority. Veterans' oral histories provide irreplaceable perspectives. The Veterans History Project has recorded hundreds of interviews with Turkey Shoot participants. These first-hand accounts preserve details that official records miss: the smell of aviation fuel, the sound of Hellcat engines, the sight of burning aircraft falling like meteors. Educational programs ensure the battle's lessons reach new generations. The Naval Aviation Museum's flight simulators allow visitors to experience aerial combat from a Hellcat cockpit. Documentary films combine veteran interviews with computer-generated recreations of the battle. These programs transform statistics into human stories. The Turkey Shoot accelerated military aviation development. The battle proved that radar-directed fighters could create an impenetrable defense against conventional attack. This lesson influenced Cold War strategic planning, leading to sophisticated integrated air defense systems. The proximity fuse technology pioneered in 1944 evolved into modern smart weapons. The principle of detonating munitions near targets without requiring direct hits underlies everything from surface-to-air missiles to contemporary air defense systems. Fighter direction techniques developed for the Turkey Shoot became the foundation for modern air traffic control. The same principles of radar tracking, vectoring, and centralized control that destroyed Japanese air power now safely guide millions of civilian flights annually. The emphasis on pilot survivability seen in the Hellcat influenced all subsequent American military aircraft design. Every modern American fighter incorporates extensive armor, redundant systems, and escape mechanisms that trace their heritage to lessons learned in the Pacific. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot represented more than tactical victory. It demonstrated that modern warfare had become a contest of systems rather than individual courage. Superior technology, training, logistics, and intelligence created conditions where bravery alone could not prevail. Admiral Mitcher's after-action report stated simply, "The enemy's carrier aviation has been destroyed." That destruction came through the convergence of American industrial might, technological innovation, and human skill. 12 hours of combat on June 19, 1944, eliminated Japanese naval aviation as an offensive force. In the depths of the Philippine Sea, 3 Japanese carriers rest on the ocean floor, their aircraft still in hangars that would never again launch strikes. But the true destruction occurred in the sky, where over 400 Japanese aircraft and their irreplaceable crews met their end against American Hellcats. The disparity was final and irreversible. Japan began June 19th with hopes of a decisive victory that might stall the American advance. They ended it with their carrier aviation effectively eliminated, their strategic position hopeless, and their homeland exposed to the strategic bombing that would culminate in atomic destruction. The Turkey Shoot was not just a battle. It was the moment when technological superiority, training excellence, and industrial capacity converged to create an insurmountable advantage. The age of the samurai aviator had ended, replaced by an era where systematic superiority determined outcomes. Lieutenant Alexander Vraciu's 6 fingers held up to Admiral Mitcher became the battle's enduring image. A young pilot's triumph captured in a moment of joy. But behind that gesture lay the fuller truth. American pilots, flying American aircraft, supported by American technology and logistics, had achieved what no amount of Japanese courage could overcome. The Hellcat had lived up to its name. bringing hell from above to those who challenged American naval power. In 8 brutal hours, Grumman's sturdy fighter had transformed the Pacific War's trajectory. The plane that some called the aluminum tank had proven that survivability and firepower trumped agility and finesse. June 19, 1944, marked the end of Japan as a carrier power and the beginning of American naval aviation's absolute dominance of the Pacific skies. That dominance would continue through the war's end and establish the template for carrier aviation that endures to this day. The lessons learned in those desperate hours above the Philippine Sea, the importance of training, technology, and systematic superiority, remain relevant in an age of stealth fighters and precision weapons. The Turkey Shoot stands as history's most one-sided aerial battle, a day when American naval aviation reached its zenith while Japanese carrier aviation met its destruction. In the span of a single tropical day, the Pacific War's outcome became inevitable. The empire of the rising sun had been eclipsed by the wings of democracy, and the path to Tokyo Bay lay open across the vast Pacific Ocean.